Will you pray with me? Dear Lord, help me to do what I can, where I am, with what I have. To preface my remarks, I just want to say that over the course of the last few years, I have come to realize how vain it is of us to think that God lifts us up, gives us gifts just for ourselves. This will become plain as I go along, for there hasn't been a gift I have been given by my God that hasn't been able to be used for others. I was born in 1937, and 1 year from that date, I landed in England with my mother, who had just had her first of 3 divorces. To encapsulate my early life in a nutshell, my mother and father were both married and divorced 3 times before they passed on. And I learned a lot through their lives, not only about keeping a marriage together, and in that I was successful, for I had just completed my 30th year with the same wonderful woman. As far as my experience with alcohol through those growing years and watching all of that go on before my eyes, I had to learn for myself, and have just completed 17 years of sobriety after a life of not remembering many times where I was or what had happened to me or what I'd done. The really scary feeling looking back on it. Now, after all this time, even if I could drink, I wouldn't, because now I make mistakes and I remember them. And if you remember your mistakes, you can certainly choose whether you want to repeat them or not. Well, high school was the beginning of the first year, I think. I stayed in one school for more than a year out of the 15 years of primary and secondary education. Went to 15 different states, I think, in as many schools in those early days, skipping from father to father and job to job, and learned a great deal. Had 1 year of college, and then because of financial incapability, got a job in a bank through who was to become my stepfather in New York City. I was in banking for approximately 16 years and worked right up from the bottom. Took a year and a half off in real estate, was then back into a commercial bank where I had managership responsibility, and when I left banking in 1973, I was a vice president. Through all of those days, the drinking I learned to do in high school didn't incapacitate me, but made, I'm not sure which was worse, the workaholic or the alcoholic. I always made work on time. I never made bad decisions for the banks that I worked for, but it kept me away from home, and it kept me away from my wife and from my kids, who, well, I guess I'm still trying to figure out how to make up for that time I lost with them. They love me now. They stayed with me. I don't know why. Everybody seemed to rally around. That alcohol has, that experience has been one of God's gifts to me. Another of God's gifts was that my wife and I, attached to a very large church in Manhasset, Long Island. And as we developed in the church and we were one of the younger couples, we got active in the couples club, and when we were presidents, decided that one of the ways to get more participation in the couples club was to serve dinners. And so every month we did a dinner before our meetings, and groups grew, and they loved the dinners. And when later on the conference center became a possibility for us, we weren't afraid of mass cooking for large numbers of people. Another place where God stepped into our lives and was preparing us without any help from us. And that's one of the things, you see God's gifts coming to you, and sometimes you get all puffed up yourself and you say, wow, isn't he wonderful to give me this? He really wasn't giving it just to me or just to Cy. He was giving it to us so that we could serve others and share the knowledge, yes, but the love that we had received that just seemed, in spite of us, to flow over. Well, I guess I need to say, to kind of justify myself, that I spent a night in jail the day I had my last drink. Never having been in the military service or exposed to that kind of life before, prisons and so forth. Just one night was one of the things, and the remembering of it, that has kept me sober all these years. But I'll tell you, there's another thing too. When you're a drinker, you spend an awful lot of time drinking. I probably, from day to day, would spend 3 or 4 hours drinking. Now, the problem, I think, is, what do you do with those 3 hours or those 4 hours when you can't fill it with drinking anymore? And one of the most wonderful realizations is, everybody says, get hobbies, get this, get that. Somehow the Lord was there, and he said, Gordon, start reading. Read about me. Read about people who know me. And I just became an avid reader at about age 36, when just about a year and a half before I moved up to New Hampshire. And I was studying. I'd taught Sunday school through the years and thought I was religious, quote unquote. But I'd always been reading and studying to teach other people, and I never took it into myself. And at that point, I filled those drinking hours, a good deal of them, just with reading the Bible, studying, thinking more, taking my church work more personally, my church life more personally. And since then, I think I've been a little more sensitive to how God has worked in my life, and as I've been a little more sensitive, I think he's worked better in my life. He's been able to work harder. At least it seems to me, it shows I have a warmer heart more of the time. I feel good, not conceited, but good about what I do. And I fully give him credit, because I've never known a time that I did something on my own where it worked out right. Every time I go off on my own, something falls through. I do something wrong. It backfires. But if I can just pause like that little prayer said at the beginning, and just in the moment as I start, think it through. Is this something that me and my Lord can be proud of? And it doesn't take very long. There's a wonderful man that lives across the road. Rodney Gilbert lives across the road at the conference center. He was the former director. And if you ask him a question even today, he'll pause before he answers. And I've never known the man to give me a wrong answer. It's always right up front. He knows, and if he doesn't, he'll say so. But just that little bit of pause to check it out with, I like to think it's his Lord, and it certainly works for me. About 2 years after I stopped drinking, we were up at the Deering Conference Center. We had been going there with our family from the Manhasset Church for Manhasset Family Camp every summer, 1 week in August. And my wife and I it was a time when we were together, and there wasn't a lot of drinking there. You could stay away from it. We seemed and felt together for at least that 1 week each year. And so in 1973 in August, on a Wednesday noon, I can remember it just as vividly as if it was yesterday. I was standing in the dining hall at the Deering Conference Center telling Rodney what a wonderful place he had, and if he ever thought of retiring, would he put our name in? Maybe we could qualify to take his place. And here, well, you decide. He said, you better apply now because my wife is sick and we won't be able to work at the conference center next year. The Lord, it seems to me, pretty clearly, who prepared us with a lack of fear of cooking for quantities, a need for a change from banking in Long Island, but successfully, after I had completed a couple of years of AA and was still active in the program, had found a resource of my Christian walk to fill the void that I used to drink in. All of these things seemed to come together, and I think it was the first time in a long, long time that my wife and my 3 kids and I all agreed this was the place we should come. And so we went back to Long Island and waited for the board decision to look at our application, and eventually we sold our house in Manhasset and moved to Peterborough and ran the conference center. It has developed into a year-round ministry now with weekend retreats, where it used to be just closed up after the summer activities. Over the course of the years, I dare say that there probably isn't 3 days running, even in the off season, that somebody who's been touched by Deering or has found themselves at Deering doesn't come up to either renew old acquaintances. They may just park in the circle and walk up the hill and look around for a little bit, sit if the weather's nice, and come back down, and they may not even say hello. But there are it's been a creative place, a place away from home, where so many younger people, older people, have been able to get away and find themselves. And I think, honestly, that perhaps a little too much credit is given to Deering, because I know that all of the discoveries that have been made there have been part of the people who came. And Deering just lent its calm atmosphere and peaceful surroundings to them to facilitate God's bringing out the gifts that he had to offer those people. I was hired as a maintenance person, as a caretaker, as a food provider, facilitator. As time went on, you you can't do and love a job without seeing more and more you'd like to do as time goes on. And so I wanted a little more education. I wanted to do more. I started to do some programming for adult groups, community building type things, covenanting, working with youth groups, going out to churches and planning program with their directors and youth leaders, and then coming back and putting it on at the conference center. I did 2 quarters of clinical pastoral education at New Hampshire Hospital, and have been able to work with some people in a halfway kind of setting through the conference center, but at my own expense. And all of these things have just kind of led one to the other. I'm active in AA. I have my own club. People come in daily while I'm working in the barn or in the shop or wood splitting or whatever I'm doing, and they come and we have coffee and we talk and we share with each other, and we help each other stay sober day by day. How God could give me the beautiful gifts of people who come and visit after all the things I've done, some of which I'll never even know or remember. I don't know, except that He is truly, truly a loving God who doesn't make junk, who loves everybody and is always there for everybody. We just need to respond to Him and to take advantage of the tremendous power and courage and just unthinkable gifts that are always there for us. So the scripture, just that word, pressed down, gifts that we give and service that we make, pressed down and returned to us. I feel guilty having the job I've had over the past years. It's been I've gotten so much more than I've ever given that it just makes me want to do more. And this is something I wish I could catch everybody with, that spark, that feeling. Setting tables, for instance, in the dining hall for 15 years and never getting bored. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful prayer time. And I try and teach those who come to the conference center so that maybe 10 or 12 of us can be setting the tables, and because of the uniformity and what we're thinking about people that are going to sit there and eat with us, about people who are in pain or in suffering around the world, or our world leaders. And as we put our place settings down uniformly and neatly, being as perfect as we can in this physical world, we hope that the prayers that we're thinking will go out perfect to the spiritual world and reach those people we're praying for and make a difference in their lives. And it works. I know it works. Not a lot of people have come back and said, but some do. Boy, you must have been thinking of me yesterday. Something, I was really going through something, and all of a sudden it's a very hard thing to document. But I felt other people praying for us, especially in this time where the conference center is going to be closed. I felt the prayers lifting me up and lifting Cy up. And I really feel badly about the conference center closing. Not so much for myself, but for all those who could benefit from it, like the thousands and thousands who have benefited from it. Deering is not lost for anybody who's been there for as short a time as a day. And its gifts can be passed on to those. And because the gifts came from the individual who came to Deering, those gifts will be discovered in other wonderful places. Over the course of the years that I've been blessed to be at the conference center, so many little things have happened. So many gifts have been given. So many people would just see my garden and would go in there and work on it, because I never have time to weed and trim and prune and just lovingly take care of it and not want to be thanked, not even want to be seen there. There's a wonderful book I read years and years and years ago that was called Try Giving Yourself Away. And the gist was to do something and even get away without having been found out, to do something nice for somebody. And it's kind of fun. You ought to try it. I expect that would even work with doing the dishes and not being found out. Something for free with no strings attached, to coin a phrase from a wonderful story. I guess I must be getting old at 51, because many of the kids who were in 7th and 8th grade camps at Deering are now ministers and coming back with their own youth groups. It's wonderful to see young people who really didn't know why they were there their first year at Deering, coming out of Andover, Newton, Bangor, Lancaster seminaries, Gordon Conwell, and having churches of their own, and some of them saying that Deering was a really big part of why they decided to take that bent in life and to go in that direction. And it's wonderful, just as a facilitator, to feel that you had a little tiny part, thanks to God, in providing that space for them. I guess one of the things that I've been confronted with over the years at Deering is the feeling I get that people are waiting until they reach a certain level of education or have had a certain number of years before they start to do their thing for God, before they start to feel that they can be useful in a church community or in a community or at home, that they have to reach a certain level of learning or something. And I really think the biggest thing in life, if I waited until I thought I was ready, I'd be dead. You're never any readier than you are right now. You may be looking to give a huge, big, wonderful gift of yourself at a later time, and unless you give what you have to give right now, you'll never have that other time, because you can only have one smile on your face at a time. I always tell the story about when I was a banker, and for probably 8 years a manager of a branch bank. I'd put the key in the door in the morning to open the doors, and I'd turn around to my tellers and gals on the platform and loan officers, and I'd say, every morning I'd say it, and they'd get so sick of it. But I'd say, okay, gang, let's hear those cheery good mornings. And I've seen people who came in hardly awake, negative, be lifted up by somebody in our bank that made them smile, that made them think that somebody really cared about them that morning. And so, don't wait. Discover what you have to give right now where you are has been the lesson that I think Deering has taught me. And give it right now, because God is like a flowing stream, and the minute you make a little empty place, He'll fill it up again. It's wonderful. Just you'll never run out of ammunition to give as long as you're giving from your heart. As the conference center closed, I really was confronted, I think, for the first time with the question, why do I think I know God's will better than the board, whose decision it was to close Deering? And I had to finally come to grips with the thought, I don't know God's will. Down the road, it may be made clear. Sometimes it's made clear right off the bat, and you do things and you think of something and immediately you know it's right. This is not one of those times for me. But I have, over the years, developed not enough, but enough faith to know that He's in command and that there is a reason for what happens. That even if I use and abuse His gifts to me, He's there. He'll pick up the pieces. He knows what's right. He's guiding us. I guess the gift that Deering has given me, and maybe given each of you who has been to Deering at one point in your life or another, well, I can only talk for myself. But see how this fits you. Deering helped me to consolidate my past and to pull in all the little threads that are part of me. I was an alcoholic, and I learned how to cook for big groups of people, and I left my wife to raise my kids for a long time, and I'm sorry about that. All of those threads came with me to Deering. And whether it was the hill, Vesper Hill, or the friendship and the openness that I found from the people there, or the quiet times I was able to walk in the woods, or what it was, all of those things right then focused for me and showed me a life of service. For you, maybe a new direction. Maybe it brought all the things and the threads of your life in and showed you that you were pretty good and right on track where you were. And so it sent you back home to do more of the same that you were doing. But whatever it is, Deering seems to have been for me, and I hope for you, a catalyst, which just because it was away from and gave you time to think and to internalize your life as you looked at it. And the fun you had there, the fact that, my gosh, church can be fun. being Christian, not using the kind of language I use sometimes at home inadvertently. All of these little things are not necessary to have a good time, to be joyful, to be helpful, to serve others. These things are the things that struck me. People say, how can you work such long hours? And I keep telling them, I haven't worked since I came to Deering. It's fun. It's doing things for love and for service of others, and seeing them be happy about it takes all the drudgery out of anything you do. And so, yes, I feel very selfish and lucky to have had Deering for as long as I have, and as consistently over the years. But you can make a Deering out of your job, out of your school, out of everything you do, out of your relationships with other people. It's up to you. Deering was that catalyst for me, and I know it was for you. It'll live in your hearts, and you'll be able to, like the lucky disciples who were able to see Jesus. And even some of them had their doubts. But we can pass that Deering spirit. We can pass that love of Christ that's in our hearts. Because at Deering we've kind of touched the heart of Christ. And so you can pass that on to others, and it'll be just as beautiful in their memories as it will be in yours. Forever and ever. And I guess the thing I wanted to share with you is trust God. He has made all of the events in your life up to this very moment a part of you. Don't belabor those, but live in the moment. Listen with love to every word that's spoken. Look with eyes of love to pick out the real feelings behind the words when people speak to you. And take the time to be single-minded and to give each thing you do your full attention. Everything will fall into place. All your schedules will be met. And in that way, you'll find true joy, an exciting zest for what's going to happen next, for what's going to happen tomorrow. And you'll be happily tired at night. You'll be doing God's will where you are, with what you have. We're continually, fully, never out of His hands. He is always there. Help us in our awareness of Him to be true instruments, channels of His love.